Christian Parenting. Aloha, friends, and welcome to the Monica Swanson podcast, powered by Christian Parenting. I am Monica Swanson, mom to 4 boys, wife to Dr. Dave, podcast host and author of Boy Mom, Raising Amazing, and the newly released Becoming Homeschoolers. Here on the podcast, it is my goal to bring you practical advice and biblical wisdom for raising amazing kids and building strong families. You can always find show notes over at monicaswanson.com/podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you'll be encouraged. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast, and I am super excited to round out our 3-part summer series about youth sports with an interview with my son, Luke Swanson. This is my 3rd son. Luke is 20 years old. Many of you have heard him before on the podcast. In fact, I would say he's probably been a very top favorite guest. Luke is super fun to talk to. We sat down and I said, let's go about 30 minutes, and an hour and 45 minutes later, we were finally done. And I was like, Luke, what am I going to do with that? And he's like, well, that's your problem. So I could not cut this thing up. I thought about putting it into 2 parts, but I was like, you know what? There's not a great breaking point. So I'm going to let people just listen at your leisure. And though Luke is talking specifically about his surf career, beginning from his youth until now, I think a lot of the things we talk about are going to be relatable to whatever sport your kids do and maybe just be interesting. And faith comes up a lot, parenting comes up. And then near the end, if you do want to jump ahead, we get into some sports psychology. We talk about some of the mental breakthroughs he's had more recently and the role that has played in his surfing. So again, I do think this is relatable, and I hope some of your kids will listen and be encouraged and be spurred on to really strive for excellence in whatever they're doing. I just hope this is an episode you all really, really enjoy, though I know it's long. So pace yourself, and I can't wait to hear how you enjoy it. So please do be in touch. I don't want to take any more time. I want to jump right in. You will find show notes at monicaswanson.com/Luke-Swanson. And now, without further ado, here's Luke and I talking about his story, which I hope brings encouragement for all of your stories. Hey, Luke, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Mom. Thanks for having me.
I love getting a chance to talk to you on and off the podcast. And we've had some really good conversations recently that just made me want to share some of the things we've been talking about with podcast listeners. So for those who are new here or somehow don't know Luke Swanson, can you give us the quick intro to who you are, what you do, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know, I am my mom's 3rd son. I'm 20 years old now, which feels crazy to say. But I am currently pursuing a professional surfboarding career, which is pretty much the funnest thing ever, as you can imagine. And I'm here at home whenever I'm not traveling, hanging out with my amazing parents and little brother. Yeah, loving to get the opportunity to get on the podcast anytime I can.
Sweet. And you were homeschooled, and now you're dabbling in some online college classes.
That's right. Yeah. Don't want to leave that out.
Right.
I'm not a stereotypical surfer, I don't think.
No.
In the sense that I like to keep learning. And so I have been taking some college classes since graduating high school. And yeah, just keeping on a slow learning track.
Well, and you also just read a lot of books and doing some ministry, leading Bible studies. Yeah, we're super proud of you, Luke. Thank you. Maybe just the quick big picture of where you're at in this surf career of yours.
Yeah, I guess the quick, the quick synopsis or synapsis, is that how you say it?
Synopsis.
Synopsis.
That sounds right.
Is basically to become the highest level surfer, you have to kind of graduate through 3 different stages, or 2 different stages, I guess. There's a regional series, in the WSL, which is like the NFL, the NFL or the PGA. The WSL is what we have for surfing, and there's a regional series. So there's about maybe 8 or 9 of those, 7 or 8 of those worldwide. And I'm in the Hawaii region, which is pretty cool because I get to surf all these amazing waves and have contests here in, one of the meccas of surfing in the world. And so basically we have a season here every year. And then at the end of the season, they take the highest ranked surfers after a few events have gone by at the end of the season, and they qualify for the second tier of competition, which is the Challenger Series. And then that would be kind of, if anyone's familiar with like the PGA, it would be kind of like the Korn Ferry Tour, or I don't know, for NBA, maybe it'd be like making like the summer NBA teams or whatever it is, or like whatever.
Doesn't baseball have like different
minor league? Yeah,
minor league,
exactly.
major
So
league.
it's kind of like the tier below. And so you're basically in this transitioning stage where the Challenger Series is all the best from all the different regions competing in their own season. And then at the end of that season, the top 10 ranked from there make it to the World Tour, which is the top 32 surfers in the world. And then to stay on there, it requires more. Once you get there, it's just actually kind of the first. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of the end, kind of. It's gnarly. It's like you get there and then you have to keep doing well to just stay on. It's not like you get a card or
you're
a
never
spot.
secure.
You're never really secured.
And you are choosing to sign up for this life.
Yeah. Well, again, it's surfing. So,
And the good news is Luke has sponsors he is supported by, and whether he makes the world tour or not, you can be a professional surfer without being on the world tour or without staying on it. If you fall off, it doesn't mean you don't make a living, right?
Yeah, which is cool because I think for all sports, we live in an age now where there's such a thing as, content and marketing and social media and all these different other branches of athletics where 100 years ago, all that mattered was making the Olympics. And
right.
And then as these leagues have formed, then it was just doing well and making the championship and whatever. And nowadays, I mean, it is cool because it opens the door for a lot of people that are gifted, maybe don't have the competitive, motivation, but they can still use their gifts to, make videos or whatever it is, or just do marketing for their companies, you know, and they have a big following. So it works like that. And so it's cool. There's definitely some insurance, I guess you could say, in the career.
But you are interested in competition.
Yes, for sure.
You don't want to be happy just being an influencer.
No, it's in my DNA. I want to.
And to give some context, so Luke is in what's called the qualifying series. He described the 2 steps. That's the first step. And to give some context, there's this week, as we're recording, Luke just finished the first in the next season, which was a contest at Ala Moana Bowls. And I believe it started off with 96 surfers.
Yep.
And yesterday you made it to the semifinal and placed in even 5th. Is that right?
You tied 5th, yeah.
Tied for 5th. So how many will move out of the QS to go into the Challenger Series at the end of the season?
So 5, actually.
5.
Which is funny because I'm in that position now.
Ooh,
but I'm tied for that position, I should say. But
and there's only the hard thing, I think, in the Hawaii region is there's only 4. It's Hawaii Tahiti region, actually, correct?
Yeah.
Or is it called Hawaii?
It's Hawaii Tahiti, but there's a lot of different interesting stuff happening.
Okay.
We're not sure if it's going to be Tahiti by the end of the season, but
well, typically there's 3 contests in Hawaii and 1 in Tahiti, and it's after those 4. That's all he gets. So, like, if this week hadn't gone well, he would have to wait all the way till the end of October for his next contest, which is really brutal and hard for people to be like waiting for a chance to try again. And so congratulations, Luke, on a really great finish this week.
Congratulations on not being stressed out.
We're all so proud of you. And the waves were big, and it was seriously, I wish everyone listening could watch. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded live. And so I had the privilege of being there yesterday and just seeing you really be strong in some super tough competition.
Thanks. Well, yeah. And I think going back to the point about it being hard is nothing is really worth doing that's not really hard. And so I think in every sport you find that kind of challenge. And right now for me, it's being a young adult and still not being on the Challenger Series, which is like kind of it's a good marker for where you're at with your career. And I'm not there yet. And I'm not taking that as an indication of anything. I'm just telling myself that I just have a different, track to getting there than everyone else. And
because some of your competitors you grew up with are already on the Challenger Series.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I mean, you could kind of, there's all sorts of different paths to where you want to be in.
Yep.
And if you look at it just as a 3-stage process, you think, oh, well, okay, there's the regional series sounds like something you'd get past relatively quickly. But the truth is that the level of surfing and the level of people's ability to compete and be strategic and just tactical on the water is just amazing. And Hawaii has, wow. I think arguably the best for our population, for the proportion. I think that we have the best surfers for how many of us surf. And so, when these events come around, it's no joke. I mean, there's people that are there that are, 10 years older than me that are still trying to, make it back to that world tour. And so I'm definitely not in a super stressful position compared to some people, but man, it's gnarly.
It's so
even though there's it's not televised or anything. It's
right.
It's under the radar. It's off the radar, but it's
the tensions were high down at Ala Moana Bowls. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And everyone out there was getting like, 10, a score of 10 is the highest you can get. And people were getting high 8s and 9s. And if you weren't in that range, you would not advance out of
there's a saying, it's funny, there's like this funny saying that people have developed over time in heats where it's like if you're competing against really good surfers, they say it's 8s or lates, like see you later, basically.
And 2 8s, 1 isn't enough because they give they rate your 2 best
exactly waves. And so in my last heat that I didn't make it to the final, but it was 8s or lates. And it was actually more than that. It was like 8s and 9s or lates.
You had a 8.9.
Yeah.
And then your backup was like a 7.25.
Yeah, exactly.
And you didn't make the final.
Yep. So.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, I am super excited to have a little conversation here with you because we are doing the summer series talking about youth sports, about for parents who are raising kids who are athletes, whether it's just recreational sports, whether they're young kids just trying out some different sports and you just want them to have a healthy lifestyle, or whether you're starting to see that they're pursuing something more seriously, maybe hoping for the college scholarship or a professional career one day. So we're talking about this, and you and I have been talking a lot about one of my favorite subjects, which anyone who's followed me for long knows I just am such a fan of just talking about mindset and really understanding the gift God's given us in our brain. And I love geeking out on brain science, and I'm super happy to continue to find that the Bible and brain science go hand in hand. They're not in opposition. And I've loved watching you, especially more recently, but throughout your young career, really grasp onto that and grow in the area of sports psychology, even reach out for some help with that as you've wanted to learn more, finding great books. And we've had some just conversations that I got really excited about because I'm like, okay, I happen to believe that all these surfers you're talking about, there's not a whole lot of difference in talent or potential, but I believe what can set you apart is when you get a grasp on your mindset and you realize the power God's given you to really direct your thoughts, take those thoughts captive. It's super powerful. So I thought maybe we can just go back to what you recall from your growing up years. I think we talked about stuff a little bit back then, but I feel like more recently it's really come to light. So give us a little history of your surf career.
So I started surfing when actually Josiah and Jonah started. I think it was all about the same time, which is cool because like it wasn't a thing in our family. Like you and Dad are obviously very athletic people. And so being active wasn't something new to us. But we moved to Hawaii. We lived in the middle of the island where you're not landlocked like some people are, but in terms of Oahu, where we live, you're pretty landlocked if you live in Mililani, which is where we lived. And
30 minutes to beaches.
30 minutes to the beach is you're
shore.
Landlocked. No, but people in that community tend to not go become surfers, which is interesting because you'd almost think like, oh, everyone in Hawaii surfs.
Right.
Every single human has to surf, right? But it's not true. That there's people that don't know how to swim. There's a lot of people that don't know how to swim.
We had neighbors who are like, oh, I haven't been to the North Shore in 10 years. We're like, what?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And so we grew up, playing soccer. That was Dad's thing in college and after college. And so that was our thing. And we kind of all phased out of that. And then there was a skate park nearby. And like any other kid in that era of Shaun White and Tony Hawk at the height of their career, we're just like, we wanted to be like them. So we're skating and that was really fun. And then it kind of transitioned into like Dad windsurfed. And so he would bring us to the beach, but then obviously, when you're 5 years old, you can't really windsurf yet. And so he just would send us on our boards and just kind of like, we'd catch little waves on the inside of these different kind of like just really playful, soft, beginner-esque waves. And so we all took to it at the same time. And I think Josiah and Jonah are both, we were all gifted in the sense that we knew how to stand up and we picked it up pretty quickly, but then we got so into it that it became like our
every day.
And then that's why we live here on the North Shore now, is because I think you could explain it better than I could. I was little, but it was kind of like, oh, why are we doing this every day? And we don't just move. Like, we don't need to make this commute every single day if we can just move. So, I was probably 4 or 5. I can't remember actually when I started surfing. And then it was when I was about 7 or 8, or maybe I was 6. Well, I was probably 7 or 8 when I started actually consistently competing.
Yeah. Well, there's one big annual kids competition,
which is the coolest thing ever. Yeah.
The Menehune competition that's been going on for years and years.
Yeah.
And so all of you started with that.
Yeah.
But then one thing led to the next and you were like loving competing.
Yeah. And you could make it like very like fairy tale-esque, because like it is the coolest thing. The entire community of the North Shore comes together, and even from the other sides of the island, they all bring their kids that have rarely ever surfed before or surf, once a year, or they surf every day, and they all come together and they just kind of like, everyone gets goodie bags prizes, and these little kids are just huge, and it's just the funnest thing ever. And so we would do that. But then as Josiah and Jonah were old enough and kind of like, oh, let's try out the competition thing, I at the same time was like, a couple years beneath them, and I was like, I want to do it too. Might as well. If I'm going to be at the beach on the weekend and they're competing, I might as well too. And so I think I was like 7 or 8 when I first started competing, and I was probably, I don't know, 9 years old when I decided, like, I feel like I had, when you're little, things are much simpler, but I was really little. I can remember clearly being really little when I decided, like, I want to do this. Like, this isn't just fun for me. Like, I want to do this. And then there's levels of that progress over time where you keep kind of going like, do I want to do this? Yeah, I want to do this. And so.
And you saw a certain movie, or did you read the book that also?
Yeah, I was just telling someone about this recently. So it was kind of interesting because there was a time where I kind of, I guess for lack of better words, got burnt out. And it was definitely because I don't know if I was motivated enough or what, which is hard to say about a 7-year-old, but my dad was definitely like, hey, are you going to go surf today or something? And consistently I would be like, I don't really want to. I just want to play. I just want to play Wii, or I want to do whatever. And eventually it was like, my dad just wants me to go surf. And I was kind of getting bugged by that. And I was like, I don't want to go surf. And he was like, okay, well, do you want me to sell your surfboard? And I was like, I don't care. Sell my surfboard, sell everything. And probably just being a moody little kid. Yeah. And so he did. He actually sold it, my brand new surfboard that I got. And I stopped surfing for probably 6 months when I was like 7. But then we went to the theaters, and this is so random, but I'm actually starting to understand now. We went and watched, it's actually really cool. We went and watched Bethany Hamilton's Soul Surfer. It's like the Hollywood version of her story. And in the movie, the main struggle is that she lost her arm, and is she going to return to surfing? Is she going to keep trying, or is she just going to move on and do something else with her life? And she keeps surfing, and she actually does really well, and she like wins contests and it's super inspiring, and it's all a true story. And it's so cool because we know her now, and I can directly relate my motivation, because I remember I left the theaters and I walked up to Dad on my own. I was like, Dad, I want to surf again. I really want to do this.
Yay.
And I guess it was just something that clicked when I saw her kind of motivation. And
shout out to Bethany.
Yeah.
I love it. And now, you've trained with her, and
yeah,
so fun.
Yeah. And so basically, I like from there, just a lot of competition. Sorry, this is like the really long story, but a lot of competition and like little, like even sponsorship, which was cool because I thought it was just everything. If you could get free clothes back then, I was just like, if someone could just give me free Hurley clothes or Billabong or whatever.
You just wanted the affirmation, I think.
Yeah, you want the affirmation for sure, because that when you're little, you simplify it, like I said, and it's like if you're not sponsored, then you're not going to be able to keep surfing competitively. Like that was the thing. It wasn't like there was no other option. And so when I wasn't sponsored and I was like 10 years old, I was just so heartbroken.
It also didn't help that one of your best friends on Maui was like got a contract at 8 years old.
Oh yeah. Well, deservingly so. He was light years ahead of me.
He was amazing. Eli Hanneman, there.
But anyways, so then I got sponsored, and that was another, like, it leapfrogged me into my motivation to keep surfing when I was maybe
and real
10
quick,
years old.
you can tell that story. Who was your first sponsor?
Yeah, my first sponsor was Quicksilver, and I wasn't my first sponsor, but it was my first
clothing.
It was my first clothing sponsor, I guess. I was getting like free sunscreen and free whatever from different, like, guys at the beach that would be like, oh, you're ripping, let me give you some free stuff. And I was stoked on that. That was also so impactful for me. But I got sponsored by Quicksilver. I think I was 11 years old.
And that just came from them seeing some videos of you, I think, maybe on Instagram.
Early days of Instagram, which is
so this was
cool.
When he was not of age yet, but he had we knew kind of how things worked. So we had a Instagram profile that Dave and I ran, but it was your
Josiah edited the videos, actually.
And Josiah did his video editing. That's awesome. And I got a phone call one day from someone from Quicksilver who said, let's meet.
He's a legend. Like, he's a legend in surfing, which is
Reef McIntosh.
Funny because you didn't even know who he was.
No, I was like faking.
What's your name? Reef what? Reef McIntosh? Which if you're a surfer, you know that he's like, my
family wanted to slap me. Like, you should know.
But I was so psyched, and it just got me so stoked.
Meet with him, and they
gave me some free stuff, and gave me the free backpack, and gave me the stickers, and it was like, the most exciting day of my entire lifetime at that point.
Yeah.
And
that lasted a few years working with Quicksilver.
Yep.
Just flow, we call that, where it's just stuff. No.
Yeah. It's like just like kind of you just get product, right? And they they support you in whatever way they can without without investing lots of money or anything. Sure. And so but anyways, at the same time, like, I was competing lots. And so and I think that my competitive drive just kept building and building and building. And it was a very natural thing for me. Like, it wasn't like, I think going to contests and stuff never felt like, oh, are we going to actually do a contest this weekend? It was like, we're going to contests every weekend. It was just a part of my life. And I think I learned a lot about competition then. And you and Dad both taught me a lot about how to handle wins and losses. And when you're that young, you really can't quite put it together. You can't quite understand, because again, everything's so simple. The world is so big, and it's like when you lose, it feels like the end of the world every weekend. And so for a little kid, those emotions are just crazy. And so you need someone to kind of help make that make sense for you. And I think you and Dad did a really good job at that. And then as I got older, I feel like I was kind of always encouraged when I was like, this is between maybe like 9 and 13, we'll just say. I was encouraged a lot by like the people at Quicksilver and you and Dad and a lot of people I respected in the surf community to just like, don't worry about the results. Just focus on learning. And if you lose, that's okay. But just realize why you're losing and then get better at that. And then, there was times where I would forget about that. I'd be more focused on just not losing. And that's when you and Dad would have to kind of remind me, like, Luke, it's not about that. It's about learning, and it's about becoming better at what you're doing, and not just like trying, trying is just trying. But if you're actually learning, then you can try it from learning and then improve your results. And so that became like a pretty, I feel like that was a really big help for me in those young developing years. And then I kind of got on a pretty cool amateur winning streak when I was like 14, 15, 16 maybe. And then that's also when I got picked up by Rip Curl, and that was like my first kind of like minor contract that I signed, which was really cool because that's another, when you're 13 or 14, now it's the same thing as when you're 9 and 10 about everyone getting sponsored, but now it's signing a contract. So
what does that mean when you say signing a contract? Yeah.
So when you're 9 and 10, you feel like people believe in you when they want to give you free stuff. And then when, a few years has gone by and you're between 13 and 16, it's like, oh, you'll know that you're making it and people believe in you if they offer you money to go travel or they give you a budget to go travel or to pay for your events or whatever it is. Like they want to see you keep doing what you're doing basically. And they're willing to actually spend their money to do that. And so I signed my first contract when I was 14, I think. Maybe I was 15 actually. Might have been. I think I was 15. Which is actually in today's culture in surfing, that's like almost kind of late to be signing your first contract, which is really interesting because any other sport, I mean, I don't know too much about other sports, but I have friends that are incredible athletes that are around those ages and nobody really signs contracts.
No,
you're in high school.
Yeah. You don't even think about
you're doing school and you're you don't travel either. You don't really go. I mean, in some cases your school flies you, right? Sure. But like you don't travel on your own and whatever. So surfing is just very different. But in that stage of your life, you want a contract. And so I got this contract that basically allowed me to go on like, a regional QS trip, which was like the next step at that time competitively was like, oh, you got to go to Tahiti to do the QS. And so or the Pro Junior. They have Pro Juniors at the same time, which are like kind of a younger version of the QS. It's just only people that are like 20 years old and younger. And so I took that money and we went to Tahiti. And then
I went with you.
That's right. First time. And then I just kind of, I think that when I signed that contract, it was also like you're too young to make any real big decisions about what you're doing with your life. But I was very convinced that pro surfing is what I wanted to pursue. And I already knew what that kind of implied in a lot of bigger ways, like going to college and getting a real job by the time you're 18. Like I was like, no, I want this to be what I want to be like my idols. Like, at that time, John Florence and Gabriel Medina and Kelly Slater, I was like, no, I want to be that level where it's not like something fun I do, but this is what I do. And so I knew what that meant. And when I got that contract, I remember like, I didn't know how to kind of like compare that to other people because it's really hush hush when you're that age.
Yeah, everybody.
You don't know the numbers or anything like you do as you get older. And so I didn't know if that was good or bad, but I had a feeling it was really on the low end of things for like what people get for I think it was a 2-year deal or something. And so,
and a lot of it wasn't it. You make a lot of your money. If you win an event, you'll make like an extra.
Yeah. There's like incentives. Exactly. Oh, that was actually a really cool thing. It was like, there was incentives. And so it was like,
and if you're featured in a magazine, featured in here or there, you get paid.
Yeah, exactly. And so, anyways, I think it really, that signing that when I was 15 really inspired me to work even harder and to get even better results. And at that point I was with Rip Curl, and they have just the best system for taking care of their athletes and being in touch with them and communicating with them, their desires and expectations and all that, which is really cool. I think you need that connection, especially for young people, to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then why they're getting paid and stuff. And so I understood that pretty clearly, and I think I just took that and did the best I could and worked really, really hard. And that was close to COVID. I think I was 16 years old when COVID happened, and we had just like the most amazing time during COVID, which is funny because while everyone was locked in their homes in Ohio and I don't know, California, wherever, in the middle of nowhere, which would be just a bummer. We were able to go to the beach and go surf for, the whole time. And so
you just couldn't stop and stand on the beach.
You actually couldn't
You had to
stand on
walk
the
from
beach.
your car.
You had to run
into the water.
Yeah, run to the water.
And Dad wasn't allowed to film, but I think enough time's gone by, we can tell him his workaround.
Yeah, exactly. He brought a fishing pole down because the rule was that you're not allowed to sit on the beach for leisure, but you're allowed to fish for food, because that's like some people fish for their dinner here in Hawaii. So
put a fishing pole in and sit and film.
Yeah, you'd stick a fishing
surfing.
pole in the ground and cast out a weight with no hook and let the line be a little bit slack and not care, and then just video. And he was okay to do that. But anyways,
can I pop in with a couple side notes just for anyone that doesn't?
Yeah, I'm just storytelling right now.
You're a great storyteller, so I don't mind at all. But just like as you're catching your vision for your future, it's also good to note that unlike most sports I can think of, there really isn't a college pathway to becoming a pro surfer. I know, like for Levi, who's pursuing golf, it's very positive move to go to college, play golf in college before getting
That's right.
into your pro career. With surfing, unfortunately, because of the nature of having to travel throughout the whole year, it is really difficult to full-time pursue surfing and be a college student. And that's why the online thing for college is working out.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and
just
focus on the mindset stuff as we go, but go ahead.
No, just to back up what you said, it's true, because just to, further elaborate, like surfing, you're tied to the conditions of the ocean, which is completely unpredictable.
Yeah.
At least as far as like, you can't just say, oh, we're going to compete on this date at this place.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't work like that. You know, if there's no waves, it just doesn't work, and everyone wants to surf good waves. So
you're all over the globe finding the best waves.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a little bit of a disappointment, because you have spent a lot of time visiting your brothers in college. And I think you are one person that would have loved college experience, and yet this is a sacrifice you've chosen to make.
Yeah, and I think this podcast will obviously be listened to a lot of people with kids that are not in the surfing world, and so a lot of this doesn't really matter. It's more just telling my story and how things work. But yeah, at a really young age, you're already faced with the reality of like, okay, I'm either going to do this and it's going to be great and I'm going to go at it, or I'm going to go to college and say no to this, because college is 4 years of living on a campus.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as attending a college goes, and that's saying no to every opportunity to have to travel.
There
and all
are
that
colleges that have surf teams. Your friend Makana Franzman goes to Point Loma, and Noah Kawaguchi, and they both compete. But it would be unlikely. I mean, Makana
is doing
this
amazing.
Week.
Makana makes it work, actually.
And if I'm sure if he really had opportunities, he might have to step out from college and just go full-time surfing and finish college later. So.
Yeah, which is really cool. He's made a really cool example of like pursuing both. But yeah, so basically the general idea though is that if you're sponsored, you're getting told to go on trips and get content and chase swells around, and there's that interference. And so I worked really hard, and then when I was 17, just to kind of wrap the story up, when I was 17, I signed my first kind of like more major deal that set me up for surfing as a career. And that was with Rip Curl Gun. We re-signed, and that's like been the coolest thing ever, because I love their company and everyone there. And so yeah, the last 3 years I've been on contract with them, and just been able to enjoy the kind of relief of actually pursuing surfing and traveling and getting these really cool experiences. And I was just finishing school when I signed that too. So it was like really cool to be able to like still be able to do school and then be done with high school and like feel that kind of like, okay, I was able to actually do that really well while I was surfing and on contract. And that kind of gave me the confidence to be able to say I can do this with college too.
Right.
But yeah. So anyways, that's like the story of like how I got to where I'm at as a surfer with a career. But all that was backed by a lot of mental training as much as physical training. And it's like, I think it's cool because it actually, it's a confidence building thing to think about when I just think about how far I've come from just paddling out as a 7-year-old
Right.
to where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And obviously you don't see it on paper because I'm still in the regional series of the WSL, but like it is really cool to like think about how far I've come and in navigating it.
It is. And I think we hit some different points during those earlier years, especially where before we recorded, you were reflecting on like, what do I remember about mindset? What do I remember? And I'll let you share what you said to me earlier. But I know that Dad and I had plenty of talks when you weren't with us about like, okay, how serious do we take this? Like, he might not always want to train. He's wanting to just like train when he wants to and not when he doesn't. And we would have to be like, well, if we're going to, part of the surf season every year was 2 contests back to back in Southern California. So we were required to spend pretty much a month between San Clemente and Huntington Beach. And that was not easy for us as a family because it was like, for one, you had to fly over there. You had to find somewhere to stay, rent a car, pay for all that, miss out on any work back home. And so we had those conversations where we're like, okay, Luke, like, you need to decide if you're going to take this seriously. And if so, we're going to ask you to be committed to not being a fair weather surfer, but like you're going to have to pursue this like as if you're heading towards a career.
I think that's so cool because I think that when you give kids the opportunity to feel comfortable about a situation like that, where an entire family's traveling and their lives are changing for a couple of months, and Levi, who's at the time, I don't know, 6 years old,
little boy,
is you know, living in a different environment. If he had any friends, he's not hanging out with them.
Yeah.
He's just having to get by.
Yeah.
That's a lot to ask of a 6-year-old, even though he's enjoying his life. It's still a lot to ask, and of you and Dad. And
usually Dad would stay home and work, and I'd travel with you, and he might pop in at some point. But it was a lot.
It's a lot to ask, and so when you hide something like that from the person that's kind of demanding that effort, it's silly. Yeah. I mean, it really is because they need to know what it's worth. They need to know the cost.
And yet it is challenging for parents. And anyone listening would know, like, we didn't want to put that pressure on you, but we also wanted you to appreciate that, like, buddy, this isn't just like a casual sport.
Exactly. It's like you can frame it in a positive way where you just say like, hey, we want you to know how much we believe in you, but we want to hear it from you that you want to go and do this right now because here you can look, this is how much it costs. This is how much flights cost. Could you pay for this? No, we're paying for it for you. So just know that we're doing this because we believe in you, but we also don't want, and you can understand how we wouldn't want to do this unless you really are excited about it.
Yeah. To all of my homeschooling friends and those of you who are becoming homeschoolers, I'm excited to tell you about the math and science curriculum that all of my boys have used and loved. Head over to diveintomath.com to check out Shorman Math and Dive Science curriculums. Dr. Shorman is a good friend of ours, and he does such a great job of offering a biblical and historical foundation in all of his classes, teaching the why of learning math. He brings biblical concepts into everything, and my boys have been inspired by Dr. Shorman on so many levels. Now, the diveintomath.com website offers self-paced courses in state-of-the-art e-learning system featuring expert video instruction, interactive assignments with auto-grading and grade recording, video solutions, and Q&A support with Dr. Shorman himself. Also, important to note, Shorman Algebra 1 and 2 teaches every concept on the PSAT, SAT, and ACT with over 200 practice questions. Guys, this is what your kids need to prepare for all of these standardized tests. Okay, so my boys love that Dr. Shorman taught short lessons, and it was a 4-day school week, and yet he packed in so much. They learned a ton, and it was efficient, so they could get on with doing all the other fun stuff they want to do. All right, so head over to diveintomath.com. Check out the math and science curriculums offered there. I think you're going to love them.
And so that sort of stuff is really cool.
And I think at one point we had you sign an actual contract because there was a tension between your willingness to train and we're like, here's what we're going to ask of you. If we're going to do all this, we're going to ask you to, because I think Dad is, and we'll have other conversations here on the podcast where people will get to know him and his sports, his relationship with sports, but he's an all-in guy. Like he doesn't do anything part way. No. And so he might be like, Luke, there's good waves somewhere on the island. You need to be there. And you'd be like, oh, no, I don't want to, or I want to do this with friends. And he'd be like, either you go when I say, because he studies. Dad,
Yeah.
no, like
My dad, which, you know, for better, for worse, your dad is your coach in this situation.
yeah,
I mean, I don't have a car. I can't drive until I was, you know, 17, 18. Like he's my,
16. You got your
well, yeah,
16.
I got it late. I got it at 17.
Oh, you did?
I got it late because of COVID, but
Oh,
that's
okay,
another
well.
story. But I couldn't drive. I couldn't sign up for events. My dad is like the coach version. When you go to school, you have a coach that does all that stuff
Right.
for you. Be at practice this time. I'll get your food, you know, and then planning out the competitions. Well, dad did that all for me. And so he was my coach in the sense that if I'm not doing what he's saying, it's like disagreeing with the coach, which that's just,
Yeah.
you don't do that.
And there was, you remember the Kahea Heart Days. There's a guy that trained a lot of the surfers on the North Shore. I remember things like bringing you down to Sunset Beach when the waves were big and all the kids were trembling. Like it was
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
And we're like, dude,
This
you
is it.
gotta go.
Here's your coach. Here you go. Listen to
Yeah.
what this guy says.
Yeah. And I hated that as your mom.
Yeah.
Like I just wanted to be like, it's okay, go home with me.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, put on a straight face and be like, just go, you're fine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I'd go pray.
Yeah. That would be hard.
So, but you did say something before we recorded. You were like, I'm trying to remember my mindset when I was young. And you're like, I just remember.
I just remember a lot of tears. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember like a lot of, cause like I was mentioning earlier, like the cool thing about amateur competitions here is, well, I think it's still this way. I'm out of the scene now, so I don't fully know, but it's very similar to, you know, basketball or football or anything else or flag football for little kids. It's like, there is a competition, a chance to compete all the time. And so every weekend I got to see how I would do.
Yeah.
And it takes time to learn that those results aren't everything. And so for a long time when you're little, you're just losing.
You weren't
and then
making the final. You were not making the final for a while.
Yeah. And not just because I wasn't good enough, but because sometimes I'd be distracted. Sometimes I'd be talking with friends, making jokes when I was supposed to be watching the waves and knowing what the waves are doing and not waxing my board or getting to put on my jersey late. And so sometimes it's you guys going, Luke, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like we're
Oh, yeah.
here.
Oh, my
We're
goodness.
here.
Yes.
We're here waiting for you to go out there and give your best
You have
shot.
a 15-minute heat. These were 15-minute heats.
Yeah. And what are you
nuts.
doing? And here's something crazy. So you want to talk about like the aggressive side. Well, surfing, you could say you're competing against nature, but in amateur events,
man.
especially when I competed, there's this non-priority situation, which I don't know how to not, I have to explain. Priority is basically the system of who catches what waves in a heat. And so in any organized higher level surf event, you have priority, and it's this, usually you have 4 people in a heat and there's 4 rotations of priority. So if someone catches the first wave of the heat, there's no priority at the beginning, which means whoever is the deepest person, which means the closest to the peak of the wave basically has the right of way, and everyone else has to get out of the way for them. And once they've caught their wave, they go to the 4th priority. And that has to work out with the rest of the surfers. They each have to catch a wave, and then priority is established.
Yeah.
And when you're in 4th priority, all 3 surfers in front of you are allowed to catch a wave
Before you're supposed to get it.
If you paddle for a wave and one of them goes, you have to let them go.
Or else you're like,
Or else you get an interference
Penalized,
if you
yeah.
take off in front of them.
Yeah.
Now, I hope that was a good enough explanation. But when I
you
was
can
competing,
Google
when I was
search
little,
priority and
yeah,
surfing
or
if
ask
you want to understand
ChatGPT. I'm sure you get a great explanation. But when I was little, it was 6-man, 15-minute, no priority.
A
which
bunch of
means
little scrappy kids.
just imagine,
battling
yeah,
for
just
a little
imagine
wave.
you're always trying to get the right of way. Which, by the way, you can cheat the system and basically go around someone. Like imagine just drawing a circle around someone, paddling around them, getting on the other side of them when the wave comes and then
grabbing the
taking
wave.
it.
Oh.
And so there's a very cutthroat
Oh, it was horrible.
aspect of amateur surfing that I grew up with. And so you really, your true colors are tested, and your
Character.
your aggressiveness
Yeah.
in the sense that like whether you want or not is tested.
Totally.
So, because if you want to avoid conflict, then you sit on the shoulder and you let everyone keep catching waves before
and
you.
that happened a few
And
times.
that happened a few
didn't it,
times,
Luke?
and we would be, it would be a Sunday. You guys, or sometimes, not
Usually,
always,
yeah.
usually a Saturday, but sometimes it's a Sunday, right? And we're on the other side of the island. It took a long time to drive through traffic, and then we get there, and then I let 5 kids paddle around me, and I lose first heat, and then I have to go in, and yeah, I'm bummed, but Mom's going to be a lot more bummed. And you would be like, what are you doing? Like like seriously, what are you like, put in an effort.
Yeah.
And sometimes that got to the point where, you know, when you're little, that just overwhelms you and you get scared and then you're crying and you're just like, what am I doing? I let my parents down. Like I let everyone down. And what am I doing?
To be fair too, out on the water, there's no adult supervision. So some of the kids have bad mouths.
Mm-hmm.
They would do things like pull on your leash, do like mean things, call you names, make fun of you.
A lot of things.
Oh my goodness. It's all coming back to me.
Yeah, same. It's funny. We have like suppressive memory. Like we don't, it's like, you know, when what is it? When you have a terrible event in your life and your brain blocks it out because you don't want to think about it. It's like that. It's to some extent, it's like that. But no, but really, there was a lot of times where I was bummed, not because of my own willingness to go win and not win, but really because you guys were like, are you putting in a full effort? And honestly, but this is a good thing because that taught me to learn how to manage my time and my effort, where when you realize how much work something requires, you actually put it in.
Yeah.
And you don't just like let an opportunity come and pass without putting an effort.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
and I'm going to add something here because I think this came up yesterday as well. And that is the fact that, I mean, maybe there was some moments where we got on your case, but overall, you had a very happy, comfortable life. You knew that when the surf comp was over, you still were going to get a happy home to come home to. And there were some kids I remember who you competed against.
They didn't have that.
Who didn't have that. And you could tell by watching them, well, you could hear sometimes their parents literally screaming at them and cussing them out.
Yeah.
But also you knew their future depended on surfing. Whereas I think we knew, you know what, Luke could go to college. He's smart. He's going to have a career.
And so this actually is
So I think that there was a little bit of a disadvantage.
Yes.
In that, even this week when you were competing, I was looking at some of the kids out there going, their entire lives depend on if they can do well in this. Whereas Luke's going to go home. We're going to make him dinner. We're going to have fun. He's got so many things going for him. He could go a million directions in life.
And so this is the cool thing
you had to
about
learn to dig deep.
Yeah. And so like, this is like, I mean, this is actually such a, like you could zoom way out with this and talk about the state of the world right now and like the state of America. Right. And like talk about, and it's probably said a lot, but that saying of strong men create good times or something, or prosperous times, and then prosperous times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times, and then hard times create strong men, and the cycle just keeps repeating, right? And so in the same sense, when it comes to competition, if you're given every reason to lose, or like you're not, basically there's no motivation to just avoid losing, you'll probably lose. But if you can learn how to find a way to motivate yourself to win, even if the winning feeling is great, obviously. And there came a point where it went from me not wanting to disappoint you guys and also learning how to like make the most of my time to learning how to win and then get really into the winning feeling. And then it's completely intrinsic. And I'm just and there's a process, because when I started, when you're 7-year-olds don't necessarily, if they're given a trophy, they're stoked. They don't necessarily know that like, oh, when I work hard, it feels really good. Not necessarily. Right. Yeah. And so there was a transition between wanting to make you guys proud and then learning that I was making you guys proud because I was doing something good. Like, this is good. Like, it's biblical. Like, I was working hard and I was like being diligent. I was being a good steward of the effort and the resources that were going into it. Yes. But then eventually you realize how fun that is. And you realize how fun it is to put work in and then see it pay off in real time. And then by the time, and so starting, when I was 7, I would say by the time I was probably 12, I was almost entirely intrinsically motivated. Yeah. Like, Dad didn't need to tell me to like, or you didn't need to tell me like, hey, make the most of this effort right now. It was like, I want to win this. And I want that feeling, because I really like working hard and seeing it pay off. So I don't think that everyone necessarily, when they're 8 years old, knows how to want to win. No. And sometimes it's just wanting to make your parents proud. And then you realize that, and this is also biblical, it's like when you follow the moral compass and God's word that he's given us, right? Like, there can be a point where you feel like it's just a chore. You're doing it just for their sakes. And then there's a point where you realize they want it because it's good for me. And so, and God wants us to follow him
Everything
and to
he
listen to
does.
him because it's good for me.
Yes,
and
to provide and protect.
And that's why the parenting aspect is huge about competition when you're little, because if you teach them to do it for the wrong reasons, then it's bad. I think you guys were teaching me how to give it a good effort, how to see work pay off and learn that hard work does pay off. And then also, if you're completely focused on what you're doing, you're probably going to get a good result or a reward, or you're going to feel good about yourself.
Yes.
And then that feeling is then what athletes chase, I think, is like the harder I work, the better it feels. And this is amazing. I want to keep working hard.
Right.
And then that's a great setup for success, rather than, hey, if you don't make this heat, you're not eating tonight, or like something crazy like that. Or I'm going to yell at you for 2 hours on the way home. And that's just unhealthy. That's dysfunctional. But that was, I think that's a little snapshot of how I learned how to like to win.
Right.
It was this gradual understanding of hard work paying off.
Wow.
And that's just what competition is.
That's so good.
Because competition isn't just like, it's not just natural ability tested. It's hard work being tested and who's been putting in more work.
I love that.
So,
and I think that I'm sure Dad and I made plenty of mistakes along the way. We're both super competitive people. And so no doubt, but I will say that during that time too, Dad and I were praying a lot and talking, and I know we'll have a separate conversation, Dad and I, where we're talking about identity and how important it is that as we're raising athletes, that we are doing all we can, and it's almost impossible to outweigh like the time and energy that we put into, say, your surfing or Levi's golf, but having enough conversations about your identity and where your true value comes from, that at the end of the day, when you don't do well, if your career doesn't work out, you still have that solid foundation of knowing where your true worth comes from. So those conversations were happening, but now maybe take us to how that has led you then to, I guess, where you're at today, the kind of competition you're doing.
How it's continued, yeah.
Yeah, and where you've learned this more recently, kind of the mental training that has come into play as competition only gets heavier.
Yeah. Well, I think that just going back, because it's no light point what you were saying about learning how to tie in identity and purpose and worth. And that's like one of my favorite things to talk about and just ponder with people that also compete or even don't compete, but just work really hard at something. Right. And I think that the ability to discern human effort with what God has given you the ability to do is like such a good thing, such a healthy like reminder. And like for me, I really grew into surfing, and the competition aspect of it I really enjoyed it as I became older, and it just was this exponential growth that like I just wanted it more and more. Whereas I have two older brothers that were put in the same situation, and their interests and their passion kind of drifted off. Not to say their passion decreased overall, but their passion flowed in a different direction. Right. And so like for Josiah, he led the way with like, I really like, he was writing stories. He was creating movies with he was taking pictures, and he was doing so many different cool things outside of just going to a surf contest.
Yeah.
He was going out and videoing in the water with a GoPro when I was surfing in the contest, and like getting this really cool stuff, and then going home and putting it on a computer and editing it and putting in like he had passion to do something. And so I feel like that ability for whatever it is, whether it's sports or something else that your kid's interested in, to have that ability to tell them like, this is something that God has put this desire in your heart. If it's good, God is putting this desire in your heart. Right. And so for me, as I got older, it's learning how to say, okay, well, God has given me this desire to surf, and I'm going to work really hard, like the parable of the stewards or something. Like I'm going to really work hard at this so that I can honor him with it. Yeah. Not just for myself. Yes. Because there's a big difference in saying like, oh, well, I built myself up as a surfer, and I'm going to work hard because I want it. And going, oh, God has given me this desire. Like everything that to the core of who I am, everything has been put there by God. Yeah. Except for my sin. And so like, I'm going to take this desire and use it for his glory
Right.
and to honor him. So, and that goes into like, you know, another conversation about how that looks practically every day. But anyways, I think that reminder is like the sustaining force in like competition and in becoming a surfer without as you know, there's a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into if you don't remember that. So anyways, moving though into like the kind of the psychological, you know, building of those brain muscles as I've gotten older has been one of my favorite things ever. I think that you specifically, dad too, for sure, but you specifically have always, since I was really young, instilled this idea of it's not just about what you can physically do, it's about how you can unlock it mentally. And it's very biblical. And I just think that that's been the funnest things. I think I was probably...
Yeah, can I tell what
was
I
our first
remember?
trip to Tahiti? I know you're going to talk about it. You love to talk about
it.
So,
it was so cool.
You share the story.
Yeah, I'll just... because it was
you were my coach on that trip.
I was.
You were that was like one of the few trips where...
It was really special. Well, we traveled with your friend Eli Hanneman, who's just been, you know, an incredible surfer and is a little bit older than you. And you're going to be in his wedding next fall. And he's just a great guy. But he was always kind of just a step ahead of you. And you
He was far ahead of me at the start.
He was far ahead at the start. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was like a child prodigy surfer, like incredible. And he's still a great surfer. But all that to say that traveling with him and knowing you're about to compete with him was just super intimidating. Like you probably had felt like you lost before you started. Like I'm going to be against all these other people, but I'm also going to have to share a house now with the guy who will probably beat me. And so I think just having that out there, I was like, oh, how can I help Luke get out of his head and think I actually could do really well? Like no one says it's a level playing field. You're going into this contest, anything could happen. Yeah. And that's when I heard Scott Hamilton.
How did you even find out about him? Because I've never asked you that.
I heard Scott Hamilton being interviewed on another podcast. And if I remember which one that was, I will link to it in show notes. Because it was like, I remember being out running on our trails and I'm hearing him. And I just thought, I have to get that book. But Scott Hamilton, those of you who remember, figure skater,
3-time
Olympic,
2 or 3-time.
I don't even know, but I mean, what I know off the top of my head, he's like a really small guy. He's bald.
Yeah, very small.
He's battled cancer a number of times,
and not only that, but like an autoimmune disorder since he was a kid.
Lost his mom at a pretty around your age, maybe
when he was 17,
teenage years,
18, yeah.
And yet he has a book called Finish First that just I absolutely love and highly recommend for everyone, but especially those of you who are raising athletes and for the athletes themselves.
I hadn't read the book yet, right?
Right.
You had read it.
I had read it, but did we bring the book? We brought the
book. I feel like I was just starting to read or something on the trip. Like I
was introducing Luke. I was trying to be Luke's sports psychologist.
You were my sports psychologist.
The calling I missed, but I get to use with my boys. And so I'm walking you through it all. And I think we read at least one chapter together. Yeah. But what I remember is this moment that we're in Tahiti. We go the first day to the contest
It's 110 degrees.
And you're dripping.
It feels like. Black sand beach. Imagine that.
Yeah.
100 degrees. It feels like 100 degrees. Probably like 95, but with the humidity feels like 100.
Yeah.
And then black sand.
Yeah.
So
and it's your
heat.
First international trip.
Yeah.
And we're with Eli and his dad. And Eli by then had traveled the world and super confident. And normally Luke would be like goofing off with his friends and like just being a boy. And I would be like trying to help him get geared up and stuff. But all of a sudden Eli's like messing around, talking. And all of a sudden Eli's like, where's Luke? And I was like, where is Luke? And there's like this channel of water, like a little river. And I look across the channel and there's Luke on the other side of the channel with your jersey on already. And you are like squatted down, staring at the waves with like just this complete focus. Like you didn't
You've never told me this story.
Really?
Yeah.
And you weren't chatting with kids. You weren't talking to me. You were like in it to stinking win it.
Yeah.
And I saw Eli look over and see you, and I saw fear.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
I'd love to ask Eli if he remembers.
He didn't have fear.
Well, what he saw, it was respect then.
Maybe his respect. Yeah.
He saw that you were not being childish about this, that you were
Mhm.
taking this really serious, and you went out there, and I think you were in the same heat together, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time you beat Eli in a heat,
Yeah, I think I won.
and you advanced, and
It wasn't just him.
Yeah, there were 4
the heat was
people.
actually a hard heat.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the first heat of the contest. It was like the third heat of the Pro Junior.
Okay.
I'd made it through a couple of heats, and then
Oh, really? Wait,
yeah.
I thought this was the first one.
no, my first heat. I
Okay.
can remember my first heat.
Okay.
But
Anyways,
anyways,
regardless,
yeah.
Eli was done after that, and he had to go home. And I remember going, "Oh my goodness! I think we just tapped into something really special."
Well, I was gonna. Okay, so you told a different story than I thought you were gonna tell.
Oh,
I thought you were gonna tell a story about when we were in the car together.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No.
What? I swear we've talked about this. Maybe we haven't. Or maybe we've just both looked at each other and been like, oh, that's like Tahiti days, but we never actually
We have 2 different
elaborated.
memories.
So I remember that same event. I remember sitting in the car because that's what we were doing there
Mhm.
because it's so hot and
Yeah.
turning the AC on.
Yeah.
Full blast, killing this car.
Yes.
Whatever coolant
our
was in that
stick
car was
shift that I
gone
had
by the
to
time we left.
Learn how to drive.
Yeah. And I remember you telling me as my sports
yeah.
psychology coach.
Okay,
You remember this
it's
now?
coming back.
We were directly talking about finish first, and you were telling me about reverse engineering
Uh-huh.
visualization.
I'm telling
It
you.
was the first time I had like thought about this, and I guess, or no, it's not the first time I thought about it, because you and Dad have for sure talked about visualization
Mhm.
before this,
Mhm.
but it was the first time where it clicked with me that it was a real tool. And you basically said, it was some sort of hard heat, and you said, Luke, I know this is a really hard heat, and it's really easy to tell yourself that you probably are going to lose it because all these people are older than you and whatever. But I want you to picture, and this is something hard to do, and it's still to this day very hard to do. But I was able to do it, and I clearly remember being able to do it. And you said, imagine yourself winning. Just picture it. And it's a hard image to create if you've never done anything of that
Mhm.
level before. It's a hard image to really picture without it feeling just super fake.
Mhm.
And it was like, picture that and realize that it's a reality. Like think about it like it's something that actually could happen. It's not a fantasy.
Mhm.
This is something that you could do
Mhm.
potentially if you go out and you get the best waves and you surf them well and they don't, then you could win the heat, right?
Mhm.
There's always a way to win a heat, which is really cool. It's just like any other sport. There's always a way.
Mhm.
And so I was able to do that. And I remember having a clear picture of like winning the heat. And then you just were like, okay, now just go backwards from there.
Mhm.
What do you have to do to get there?
Yeah.
And it starts with how you think.
What would that person who's standing there with a trophy see looking back on this next heat? What would
Yeah,
this
exactly.
heat look like
Yeah.
to get you to that?
And would they have
trophy?
said, oh yeah, before that heat, I was actually hanging out and just like, drinking a Sprite with my friends and chilling in the restaurant nearby? Or was it like, oh yeah, before that heat, I was watching the waves? Basically, in other words, what does a winner do?
Yes.
What would a winner do? And that's a lot of
Yes.
what Finish First is about, is just asking yourself, am I doing, like, imagine what you want to do, and then ask yourself, am I doing what it takes to do that? Which is a very simple question to ask, but
Mhm.
like a lot of the time we're not quite
Mhm.
on the same track. We're a little bit off. Like,
We're
oh yeah,
living one
I'm
way.
preparing, but I'm not preparing as if I'm going to win.
Wow.
So
yeah.
then you kind of told me that. And I think that's what kind of
Mhm.
kickstarted. And I made that heat. And it was like, I remember that's when it clicked for me. Like, well, Mom was actually totally right. Like I could win
Like,
if I just believed
this
it and
is
then worked towards that
Yeah.
from the end, looking backwards.
Yeah.
I
Like
did
you
it like
tapped
that.
into something really.
That was like the first time I remember being like, well, my brain can actually help me. And I don't just have to think I'm going to lose. And that was actually right before a lot of big results. Like
Yeah.
I went into this kind of like phase of life when I was like 14, 15, 16, where I won a lot.
You won.
A lot of amateur stuff I won. And then I did good nationally a couple times, never won or anything. I won states. That was a big one. And I feel like I was definitely using my mind.
And I think you won world champs.
Well, that was later.
Okay.
That's actually another story. But basically, like, I realized that I'm looking back now, realizing that moments like that were turning points where I was actually able to dig deep and
Yeah.
and some people do that without digging deep, and that's good for them. And maybe they go a long time. And I honestly am at a point now where I could say that I know a lot of people around me in the surf world that haven't figured out how to use their brain yet.
Yeah.
And they still do really good.
Right.
But what's bound to happen for anyone is
Mhm.
that everyone's going to come to a point where they start losing a lot.
Yep.
In any sort of area of life.
Yes.
Nobody wins forever.
Yes.
And at some point you have to, well, you don't have to, but you can choose to
Mhm.
attribute it to the way you think. And when you do that, you're going to see like a lot of success. And so like, or you're going to see a lot of progress in a good direction.
Right. And this makes me think of Dad's famous phrase about hard work and talent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's like a well-known phrase, but
Right. But Dad says it all the
Tim
time.
Tebow.
Oh, was it a Tim Tebow?
Well, if
quote?
we're thinking the same one,
Go
that
ahead.
hard work beats talent when talent isn't working hard.
Yeah. And I mean, that's hard. That's not necessarily mindset, but,
Mental work.
but it's mental work. Yeah.
Mental work
yeah.
beats talent when talent
Because-
doesn't use mental work.
Yeah,
I mean, you could say it like
right.
that.
Absolutely. Because I do think there are people who are just such naturally talented athletes. But this also goes to show that, I mean, so are you. But some people just don't even have to think.
Yeah, they don't.
And yet, I think that when you get a grasp on how much potential you have and how much hard work can do for you,
Mhm.
you realize that sometimes you're going to have just as much of a chance.
And there's some situations where it's like, this guy's doing really good and his coaches aren't telling him to change anything. And it's like, well, I probably wouldn't either because they're doing great. And you don't want to start telling them, hey, start visualizing or start doing this or
Yeah,
start
yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. Like maybe that'll throw them off. But a lot of
For those
people,
of you
oh
who
my
need
goodness,
it,
how
us
many
who need
people
it.
out there are right now, I'm seeing them starting to lose for the first time in their life in a different way than usual. And they're now realizing like, whoa, I'm like defeating myself before
Yeah.
I even go out.
Okay.
And so like that kind of ties into something I've been learning a lot from, well, it's this theme in this book that I was reading, but it's basically like the real champion wins before they go out for battle.
Mhm.
That's just like a very good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And it's always true.
Yeah.
Nobody goes out not expecting to win and then just accidentally wins consistently.
Right.
Like the person that wins the most is the person that believes they're going to win before they go out. And so
And this makes me think of, sorry, go ahead.
No,
You
no, you
finish
go.
that thought.
That's it, that's
okay. Well, I was just thinking that you hit a point, goodness, was it 1 or 2 years ago where I think you came to a realization because now you're on a higher level, you're competing against, like you said, people older than you who have surfed longer than you, and you realized that your mindset had slipped to be at a place where you went out to compete thinking, I just don't want to lose.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that you came to terms with that. And actually, I think you reached out to your friend and hero, John Florence, with that.
Mm.
And he had some really encouraging words to say, which
Yeah.
I think was helpful to realize that
Well,
he had felt he
here's-
has even been through those things.
Here's another just like aside for anyone that's listening that wants to. My thoughts are directed by what I focus on,
Mhm.
and then also the people I'm around.
Yeah.
And I've been surrounded by not only the best parents ever and great brothers, but like within the surfing world, I've found an amazing group of people that have all brought me like so much farther along than I would have been on my own. And like, I think people always say that like you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. But like, for example, like you were mentioning John, like John is, I think any surfer would like to be his friend. And it's been really cool to get to know him and hang out with him like at a personal level.
And for anyone listening who's not in the surf world, John is John Florence, who's born and raised here on the North Shore and has,
Currently the best surfer in the world.
I mean, yeah, most
Rated
people would-
rated
Yeah,
number 1 right
at
now.
this moment, yes.
Um,
And he's a pretty quiet guy that doesn't have a huge like friend group. He keeps to himself and to a few select people. So
I'm sure he has a huge friend group, but yeah, he keeps to himself.
yeah,
He has no friends. Yeah, he's kind of a nobody.
I'm saying he's not like Mr. out there.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And probably he has to be because he's a bit of a celebrity on our North
Yeah,
Shore. Like if he
it's-
goes anywhere,
it's
he's
hard.
probably got like hat and glasses because everyone will stop him and want his autograph.
But him,
But for some reason, he's decided that you're his friend.
yeah, well, he's a great guy, and I'm privileged to get to know him, and also to get to know a lot of people, like my coach Ross Williams, who I've been working with for 5 years now. I think 6 years now,
Amazing
maybe even.
guy.
Just the best person ever, and I mean, I've learned so much from him and so many different people. But going back to where I was at mentally, like I think there came a point. I mean, everyone has this. When you lose enough, you start to think differently and you start to see yourself differently, no matter how good you were in the past. And someone like John can actually attest to this. And that's why it was so helpful to get to talk to him during that time, because no matter how strong you are or how good your stats are, or how good you've been in the past, how many championships, titles, whatever it is, you can, if you lose enough, you start to see yourself differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to a point where when I was starting to surf and hang out with John and get to know him, where I was like, yeah, I was beating myself up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you can actually have those two things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I'm hanging out with the best surfer in the world and
Yeah.
I'm like, I just suck. Like
I'm a loser.
Yeah. It's like that should be a confidence builder. But he helped me kind of have this moment where he was like, dude, I've had that happen. Like I've had bad runs. And when I was your age, or when he was a little bit older than me, but like, or no, he was my age, a little younger than me actually, where he had a bad run for a long time and then things broke through.
Yep.
Right. And so like, that was like,
doesn't that help to hear that? Like, oh my goodness, if John Florence had times like that.
yeah. And it's so real, and you don't even have to actually ask them. You just have to see it. Tiger Woods is a great example. Like we're golfers now in this family, and Tiger had a crazy downfall, like one of the biggest in sports, where he just lost forever. And actually, Scott Hamilton talks about it in his book, Finish First. But
and if you follow basketball players, anybody, Michael Jordan's story, like so many people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so basically, but it doesn't become as real until they start telling you about it, and you can actually relate to that moment specifically. And so, yeah, the last couple of years actually for me have been probably my hardest. I mean, because I'm at a stage now where I expect a lot of myself, and I think my sponsors do too. And you can do really good on the content and marketing and going on free surf trips and getting cool videos of big airs and whatnot. And that's great. But I'm a competitive person, and a lot of my confidence comes from how I compete because I want to see myself as a good surfer competitively.
Yeah.
And if I'm a good surfer, non-competitively, that doesn't do much to help me with my confidence if I draw it from competition.
Yes.
So anyways,
you've decided that's your standard. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I might be super popular or get views on Instagram, but what I really want is to win contests.
Yeah. Which is like a whole nother conversation can be spoken about from like what it means to be a fan, and like when you have people in your life and idols, right? Idols are huge in sports. I mean, you could see someone as more than human and think that they just have everything, and you get to know them, you find out they don't even think of themselves as that much.
Right.
They sign autographs the second they walk out of the door, but like they still don't see themselves as what they want. And that's just the trap of, the world and sin and just like coveting. Right. But, so anyways, for me, like, I've had just this really cool process the last, I think it's been about 2 years, because it was winning Worlds was probably my high point, where like I was doing pretty well competitively, and then COVID happened and there was no competitions for a long time. And then I had a couple events that were like not so good, and then I won the Junior World Championships, which is in
El Salvador.
Yeah, in 2022. And that was like the highest point of like my competition, which is so funny because everyone says like, like you always hit the lowest point right after the highest point. And I didn't know that to be always the case, but it happened for me for sure, where like 2 weeks later I had a regional QS event and I lost first heat. And
the one you just did.
The one I was just in this week, but two years ago. And so that loss was followed by another loss and then another loss. And then I had one good result in there, but for 2 years, basically I've had a lot of bad results. And that doesn't mean I've had not a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. You just
haven't had many contests.
I don't have many results, period.
3 contests in a year.
Yeah. I haven't had many results, period. But when I did have them, they've been bad.
And you could look at each one and be like, well, this is what happened. And this is why it was like the waves got flat or this. Like I could explain each one.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And if you didn't compete well.
Yeah. And so with the background that I've already given of like how much I've been into this mental game, there was this time, I think it's about 1.5 years ago, when I had one good result and kind of the mix of a lot of bad results, where I kind of realized how I did good, I guess. Like I realized that it was a perfect setup, because anyone can relate to this if you've golfed ever, actually. If you're playing really, really bad, there's a certain point where you stop caring. And everyone's had this. If you've gone out and played 18 holes and you've played, any golfer's had it.
Happens to me on like the second hole.
Yeah. Well, if you've golfed, period, you've had this happen, but you have a bad shot or bad hole. But if you've had a lot of bad stuff, there's a certain point where your brain basically checks out.
Yeah.
Or the dialogue in your brain checks out, and you start laughing, you start joking with people, you start talking about other stuff, and you basically just forfeit your ego and your confidence and anything that goes into it. You just like give it up. And then the craziest thing happens every single time.
What?
You start playing really good.
Oh, really?
And it's the funniest coincidence because it's like you stop caring and then you play good. And the same thing happened a year and a half ago where I had a bad season. And I was going into the last event of the season. I was in Tahiti. And
I wasn't there.
There was a pie in the sky Hail Mary chance that I could qualify for the Challenger Series if I won it. I think I had to win it. And so I basically was not expecting to win.
Right.
Because
it's like no pressure.
That's really hard.
That can't happen.
That can't happen. So I'm just going to go there. But I want to go because there's a difference between completely checking out but still giving it an effort and then just like being apathetic.
Yeah.
And I still went. I still spent the money and went to Tahiti and actually put in a lot of practice. Like I put a lot into it as if it was probably something big. But I think that was the point is I went there like, oh, well, I'll just do everything. But I'm also freed up to not really care how I do. So I'll just go there. And if I lose first heat, well, I had a bad season anyways. And then I got third. I got an equal third. I made the semis and it was a 2-man final. So I got third. And I left and I was like, oh my gosh, whoa. I stopped caring and then I did good. And I put in the effort, but I stopped caring and I did good.
And maybe the word stop caring isn't as much as like...
Stop stressing.
Yes.
So I stopped stressing and then I did good. And then I tried to take that into the next event and I couldn't replicate it. I just couldn't. I made a heat. This was about 3 or 4 months later. I made a heat at Bulls. This is at Bulls again. Made a heat. The second round, I had a 9, 3 minutes into the heat, I think it was.
I remember.
Or maybe more like 5 minutes into the heat.
The highest score
I got a 9
of the entire contest.
One of the highest. Probably not the highest.
At that point, it was the highest.
At that point, it was the highest. I got a 9 on my first wave, which for anyone in any sport, that's like having 2 touchdowns in the first quarter and the other team is just throwing a bunch of picks or something. Or like in basketball, it's like your team is up by like 20 points, whatever. It's amazing. And I basically killed myself. I shot myself in the foot. I didn't do anything the rest. I didn't stand up. I didn't stand up the rest of the heat. I had 20,
like you were paralyzed.
I had like 20 minutes to catch a second wave. And I actually didn't need to because I was making the heat with just 9 points.
Because the waves got pretty bad.
Third place, which is not advancing. It's a 4-man heat, and third place needed like a 4 and a 5, right? I mean, that's all you need to pass me up. And he wasn't making it.
You thought you were playing defensive because you were like, well, I'm going to keep somebody off of waves, but
and it wasn't like the biggest choke ever. But then you can see it as the biggest choke ever because I had every opportunity to make the heat and I waited until the last second to basically give an effort to try to catch another wave. And I could dive into the details of what was actually happening, the situation. I don't need to. But the point is I basically blanked. I drew a blank because I was so stressed out at the end of the heat. And I lost the person got the score with like 20 seconds left. He got the score he needed and I went to third with 1 wave. And we all
replayed that in our head for the next.
And then I replayed that in my head and then I went out and lost again. And then I replayed that in my head and I lost again. And so I had quite a few bad results. Now fast forward to or I guess you could kind of go to back to that event. Afterwards, I realized, and I talked to my coach Ross about this, and I talked to John, and I talked to you and Dad, and I talked to everyone about it. But I basically doubled down on like my brain is what did this. Yeah. It wasn't my surfing. My surfing is good. My brain is what did this to me. And so I need to learn how to take control of that. And by no means am I saying that like, oh, 1 year later, here I am. I know how to win every single heat and I have the confidence to move mountains. No, it's like I just focused on it more than I ever have in the last year. Yeah. And I've read a lot of books.
And I even said, I think between your last contest and this one, I said that I believe that was the key and that it might be wise to talk to a sports psychologist and just see if there's some breakthroughs you needed.
Yeah. And I have been. And I want to say that like, I could go through and like explain all the tools like we're kind of talking about last night, what got me through this last event
Which mentally. Is what I kind of wanted to have this conversation.
An hour later, we're like, still haven't got to what you wanted to talk about.
This may be a 2-part.
Yeah. Well, whatever. People can get the whole story, the whole context.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. I just want to pause real quick to tell you about something very cool now available over at the Christian Parenting website. Okay, so there is the cutest little prayer journal. I'm looking at mine in front of me. It is called Marked by Prayer, and it is a weekly prayer journal for parents, and it will guide you through praying for your kids every week of the school year. Each week presents a new topic to journal and pray about. Topics include things like generosity, self-discipline, salvation, identity, godly friendships, and more. These are all the things we want our kids to be marked by, attributes that we want them to be marked by. Well, we are guided to pray for these things. And then there's a little section for journaling, some suggested scriptures. You guys, it's really, really good. So you can get your copy over at the website, cpgive.org. Again, the letter CP is in Christian Parenting, give.org. Request your school year prayer journal, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And then something fun to go with that. If you want to listen to a podcast that is going through these guided prayers and a reflection, Pardon the Mess podcast each Monday is going to be doing that. Now, Pardon the Mess is an awesome podcast. It was Christian Parenting's OG, their original podcast before the rest of us joined. And it's so good anyways. But on Mondays, they're going to be taking you through the guided prayer and reflection from this prayer journal. So definitely tune in to Pardon the Mess on Mondays. I think it's going to be so good. I can't wait for that. All right, friends, now we'll get back to today's conversation. I hope you enjoy.
But I basically have just tried, and I've learned a lot about the different tools that go into what it takes to compete confidently. And I guess one of the main things I've realized, you just can't be a champion without a strong mind. It's really impossible. People will win for a season or do good for a time, but nobody in the history of any sport, I think ever, has done well and been successful consistently without fully mastering, or not fully mastering, but learning, having a grasp on the fact that your brain is so important.
Yes.
And how you think and how your confidence goes is everything. And you need to win before you go out. You just need to.
Yeah.
If you don't win your heat or your championship, your tournament, whatever it is before you go, then that's just, you're not going to be, you're not going to be successful. And so that has been really cool to wake up and go okay, I'll go surf, but maybe I should spend some time today learning more about how to think.
Yep. And you've read some great books, listened to great books.
Yes. And a lot of it isn't learning something new. It's just recognizing how you think.
Yes.
So a lot of this has to do with not learning some tool of how to fake feeling that you're the best and just go more just catch yourself when you're thinking negatively.
Yeah.
You wake up and your first thought is oh, I need to jump in the water because so-and-so is better than me and so-and-so is better than me and they're working hard. And it's whoa, stop. That's a negative thought right there. Why am I comparing myself first thing in the morning? That is not what I need to be doing right now. And that's not going to help me. And so it's just all those different times of stopping myself every time I have a negative thought has been more effective than trying to manifest some oh, I'm the man. Let me puff my chest out. I'm the man. I can do this. And feeling that fake it till you make it thing. That's not as nearly as important as just noticing all the different negative thoughts, which by the way, I can tell you now from experience, after you lose for about 1.5 years or 2, it really does get to you. And you just start telling yourself the worst things about yourself.
And maybe you can tell the story then, because last night I just loved the things you were sharing with me about this week. You said that driving down, so this week, earlier in the week, you made it through one heat. That was really great breakthrough. But then yesterday you had 3, 4, how many heats? 3 heats?
3 heats.
And you said on the way to town, a narrative came up in your head that was pretty negative and how you dealt with that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, it's the simplest strategy as far as having a lack of confidence goes is I had made it through a really tough first round. Yeah. I honestly think it could have been a quarterfinals or a semifinals even. It was just huge. Great people were in the heat. And so I made it through that. And that's like the tools I used to get through that were also really cool. But like I got to the second round, and the second round has been like pretty consistently, excuse me, where I lose. And so I was driving to town thinking, man, I always make the first heat. Making the first heat was easy. That's a breeze. This is where I lose. Mm-hmm. And so that thought kept coming like, this is where I'm going to lose. Oh yeah. No. It's always like my guard is off or my guard is too much on. I'm too stressed out. And then I lose in the second round. Like it's always the second round. Like if I can make it through this heat, then I'll feel confident. And I was like, oh, well, that's not helpful. Like I just keep telling myself that I need to make this heat and this heat's going to be the hardest heat. And so what did I do? Like, well, it's more like what I didn't do. I didn't keep thinking about it. I just was like, okay, this is not a helpful thought. Mm-hmm. I keep thinking.
Captive your thought.
Exactly. Biblical. Mm-hmm. Yep. I was like, okay, I'm not going to think like this. This isn't helping me. My heart rate, I feel my heart pounding now. Mm-hmm. Like I feel my chest actually moving. Like that's a weird feeling, by the way, when your heart is actually increased, but you feel the heartbeat.
I hate it.
Have you had that? It feels like it's beating out your chest, but it's
terrible.
Not faster. It's just like, you're like, what? Boom. So yeah, dum. And so I was like, what? Okay, this isn't helpful. I realized that. And so that confrontation of like realizing, okay, this is not helpful right now. I don't need this. And just like focusing in on that exact thought and acknowledging it and not just like going down the rabbit trail of it, which is really that easy to do. Yeah, as easy as it sounds is what it is. You just acknowledge it and say, I'm not going to think about this. It's not helping me. My story's just going to be different today. Like that. I'm trying to think about things that'll help me win, and this is not helping me win. So I'm going to start thinking about something else, or I'm just going to think about something unrelated to surfing. I'm going to play a different song, right? Or like whatever it is, I'm stopping thinking about this because it's not helping me. So choosing to do that. But then like as the day went on, and that heat ended up being pretty, like it was pretty nerve wracking. It was a pretty close heat, but I was able to be way more present, I think, in the heat and make clear decisions because I wasn't for the hour and a half before it, which was the most important time. Like that was maybe 2 hours before my heat, but the next, whatever, up until my heat, I wasn't just thinking about negative thoughts about losing. Right. I was really, truly focused on what is it going to take to win and getting excited and becoming grateful and just thinking more about the opportunity than like what might happen. And so, yeah, it's really.
And then take us through. I think it's really fun to hear the story of how that went down. So then you said, so everyone listening, this might be interesting to people, for where he was surfing this week, Ala Moana Bowls, for those of you who have spent time in Hawaii, especially.
Gave me a dang ear infection that I'm dealing with right now.
Pretty gross down there. But there's this channel that the surfers have to cross where boats, especially tourists on boats, come through. And if you're free surfing, you have to paddle across that. And that area is known to be sharky. So that already is like a fear factor because there are sharks there all the time. But for the contest, they put them on the back of a jet ski and the kids can paddle out. And you told me, you're like, so this is what I do. Take us through that. So you're like I get on the jet ski.
I think this is where it becomes more personal. Like the confidence thing is something that everyone can apply. And noticing bad habits is like the first step in like turning things around, is acknowledging, right? Just like any other bad thing in life, you have to acknowledge it. But for me personally, this pre-heat routine, or like just routine in general, and like I think routines build confidence, not because there's some ritual or superstition, but more that it reminds you of how much you've practiced them. And it brings you back to like, oh, this is what I do every day. It's muscle memory to think like this. That feels really good when you're going into a situation that's not very common to you, like putting on a jersey every 6 months. And so I had like written down a lot of different things that I wanted to think about before the contest came around, like a while ago. And I've been thinking about them a lot leading up to the contest. But then I think my personality is to be very perfectionistic and to have everything organized. So like I'm not necessarily organized with everything, but if I'm going on a trip, my bag's going to be very well packed. You are. I'm going to have all the right things. Like I'm very perfectionistic when it comes to organization.
He zips up my bags when we're traveling together.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great example of it. And so in creating this pre-heat routine, it's fun for me. I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? Like, okay, I'm going to pull up my phone, pull up the notes and like, okay, 8:00, I'm doing this and this and this. And it's not about like, if it doesn't work out, then it's the end of the world, but just like, it's fun to do that for me. I don't know why I enjoy that. I just do. having having all my ducks lined up, as they would say.
And
so
Levi's doing the same thing.
Levi has a very personal, a very similar personal, like tendency to do the same thing, which is cool because we relate in that way. But, so I had this kind of like routine that I was following throughout the whole event. And, I mean,
so you get on the jet ski, you're like,
well, yeah. So there's a lot of things even before that,
people.
like so many things before that, like getting to the contest site, right? Like 6 a.m. and just like seeing people that I haven't seen in years because they just randomly decided to do an event, or I haven't seen them in a year. And the last time I saw them was here. And the last time I was here, I was losing. And so that negative thought gets attached to that person when you see them.
Oh, wow.
And so when you see them, you're just like, oh boy, I'm seeing them again. It's time to lose, right? Like those sorts of things.
Yeah.
There's so many different little things. And so I had to like be ready to like already have different thoughts instead.
Yep.
And so like before the event, I was like, okay, I'm seeing these people. I'm excited to see them, but they're not the reason why I'm here. I'm here to do a contest. So just make an interaction and move on.
Yeah.
Don't think about them. You're not here to interact with them. If you want to hang out with them, you can text them and you can go get coffee or something, but they're not the reason why you're here. You're here to win. And so those people, and then why are you here? Oh, well, you're not here because you just paid and because the brutal reality of these contests I'm doing is that anyone can do them. I mean, you have to get in eventually at some point. You have to be let into the contest if you have, if you've paid, and then once you have points, though, you're trying to keep enough points to keep doing these contests. But for the most part, anyone can do them.
Yeah.
It's a very like wide range of surfers entering them. Yeah. And so there's that reality of like, I'm competing against guys that don't even take surfing seriously.
Yeah.
Like in the first round, at least.
Yeah.
And so like, that can be like, they just feels weird, right? It's like, imagine Tom Brady going to play in his prime against like high school players. Just like, it just feels weird. So I kept telling myself with that thought, I kept saying like, okay, I'm not here because I paid the insurance or the registration. I'm here because for the last, 12 years or whatever it is, I've been wanting to be the best surfer in the world. And so like, that's why I'm here. It's not because the same reason these guys are here because they could get in and they just wanted to have fun.
Yeah.
No. I'm here because I've been practicing for this. And so there's that thought, or like when I see people and I have that negative, like, oh no, I'm seeing people again. It's like, no. They're just people. They're doing the event, but I'm here to win. And that's my deal. I'm just going to focus on that. And that sounds kind of like simple, but it's true. Like that helps so much. And then like walking down there and being like, oh my gosh, I'm here again. It's the same place I've lost so many times before, and choosing to be like, no, this is such a cool place that we get to come compete at. Like, I'm so glad we get to come back to this place because it's a good wave. When it's good, it's one of the best waves on that side of the island. Like, I'm so stoked I get to be here. This long walkout to paddle out. And I was like, it's such a cool walk. And like thinking about things and just any sort of thing I could attach to a negative thought, I just wanted to switch around and make it positive. And then like,
and that takes some intentionality. That's not easy.
Yeah. And then getting ready for the heat. One thing that I've dealt with in the past is like, I have an hour to get ready. And sometimes the first 10 minutes, I'm kind of drawing a blank mentally. And then there's 50 minutes. I'm like, shoot, I already wasted the first 10 minutes. Am I even ready for this heat? And so I had this thought that I attached to that where it was like, the time before my heat is specifically allocated for me to just get ready and feel good. And it's been set up. It's not, the time isn't running out like a little sand, like an hourglass. It's not running out. No. Like, this is time that I've given to myself. Like, I'm adding it up. I'm not subtracting. I'm not like scared it's running out. It's like, no. This is the time to get ready.
I like
I'm
that.
not like, it's not some resource that I'm running out of. Like, I don't know how you can really, I don't know how to communicate that, but there's a negative way to think about it and a positive way to think about it.
I love that. No,
like,
it makes sense.
Oh, it's the countdown for a spaceship. The spaceship's ready to go. It's just, there's a countdown before it takes off, right? Instead of like, it's an hourglass, and at the end of the hourglass,
it's gone.
A sword drops on my head or something, right? Like, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. But I basically was like,
and wait, this makes me think of something that you might not think to share, but if you don't mind, from one of the books you've been reading, and we will be sharing some of Luke's favorite books on this topic over in show notes. There'll be a link or something, but one of the books you've read recently has been really helpful in talking about, and this isn't directly related, but I want to make sure you include it. So I want to pause here so that you talk about the difference between saying, well, what if I'm not ready? And this can apply to, are you ready for a test? You've studied and studied. Are you ready for the test? Or are you ready for a competition? And that I don't know, I call it imposter syndrome in the world that I'm in, where it's like, I might not have done enough to be ready for this. Tell us what you learned and how that affects you leading up to the contest.
Yeah. So the question posed to this author, it's a sports psychologist, or I guess more psychologist, but a lot of sports involved. But it's, what do I do if I haven't prepared? And I know I haven't prepared. It's not like,
or somebody else is better prepared. Maybe
the best example is like you're at college and there's a test, and you know that you probably should have studied for 3 days, and those 3 days you were not at the library. Those 3 days you were out doing whatever, lollygagging, and then the test comes, and you know that you haven't done the work. How do I manifest confidence for it?
Or I think it's better. I mean, that's fine if that's how it was presented. But I would like to say, for those who have studied or have prepared, but you're always feeling like, I could have done more, I could have done better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You could say the same. And he actually the person goes through those different situations. Okay. But the idea is basically like, you never know how much money is in your wallet until you completely empty it, right? And you don't know how you're going to do on that test. You will never know whether you are prepared enough until you actually give it your best shot.
Right.
So if you go into it saying, I'm not prepared, I'm not going to give it a good effort, you're going to do bad. Right. It's like self-fulfilling prophecy. However, if you go, I don't know if I've done enough, but I'm still going to do the same thing I would have done if I had prepared, which is basically give it my best shot.
Empty my wallet.
Empty it all out. See if I have enough change. Count up the change and see if there's enough to do this thing, to buy this thing, whatever it is, right? To take this test and be successful. His whole point is, you will never know. Your brain, if your brain is what needs to be, if your brain is what's between you and doing the thing, you just won't know unless you try your best. Wow. And so his whole thing is like, who cares if you haven't? Wow. Maybe you actually were lying to yourself and you knew a couple steps beyond what this test requires.
Maybe 2 weeks ago you were ready for this contest.
And maybe because you tell yourself you're not, you actually get in your own way and you do worse on the test.
That is so amazing. Like, everybody could just like sit on that.
Yeah.
That applies to so many areas of life.
And so I also have a personality. The phrase he uses in this book is destructive perfectionism. And I have that part of me that likes to not feel like I'm quite there and use that as motivation to get better. Like, oh, I'm not quite there. I got to work harder tomorrow. And that's good. But if you do that so often that it's contest day and you tell yourself that again, how is that going to help your confidence? If you show up and put the jersey on, you're about to paddle and go, well, I'm not good enough, but tomorrow I'll be good enough. Well, right now is all that matters. Right. And so you have to learn how to practice the way you want to compete, which is with full confidence and going, no, I've actually done enough. And it's probably there in me and I just need to unlock it. And so that was another thing that I was trying to tell myself a lot before this contest was like, maybe I don't feel prepared, but I'm not going to know unless I really try. And the truth is, maybe I actually am. And the evidence kind of points to that I am. But a lot of the time, the evidence can point to it and you can still tell yourself that you're not doing enough. And then you lose because of that. Right. And it's very clear. Like you can see people just blank out in their heat and not be in the moment. Yep. And so, that was another big one for this contest and feeling prepared. And so
okay, so let's fast forward to you're in the water and
paddling out. I know.
3 hours.
So paddling out.
We were aiming for a 30-minute interview here.
Yeah. Well, one of the last things I wanted to do was on the beach. Every time before I paddled out, I wanted to think of everything I'm grateful for and actually thank God for it, because it's been said that you can't be anxious when you're grateful. They're like mutually exclusive. And so I just as a practice before I went out, I'd just start telling myself, and we were talking about this last night, but it's not like a,
natural.
It's not natural.
No, it's
in a sense, it's intentional. And so it's not like, oh, I naturally just looked up and saw a rainbow and was like, I'm so grateful for the beautiful creation in front of me. But it's more like, what's in front of me? Okay. The ocean's in front of me. Okay. This beach is in front of me. I'm at Almoana Bowls. thank you God so much for this setup. I mean, what else could I be doing? There's like, as soon as you start thinking, right, there's a million things to be grateful for. And so I just go through the list of everything that's in front of me and the opportunities and my equipment and everything. And then,
The people who give you your equipment, like you were getting real specific with your gratitude.
exactly. Think about it, because if your brain has a lot of energy in that moment, you can just keep going more and more specific, right?
Yeah.
Like thank you so much for my equipment, God. Oh no, thank you so much for the person that shaped this surfboard. Thank you so much for the person that glassed this surfboard. Thank you so much for their parents. Like you can keep going on and on and on, and think about the line of things that had to happen for you to be in that situation and the opportunity. And so anyways, and then I try to paddle out and I think that it's a good thing for everyone to do this, but just to be like happy up until you compete. And so instead of being super serious or angry the whole time before you compete, that's probably not good. So I just try to think positive. There was a jet ski driver driving us across, so I just kind of talk to him and make small talk, try to say a joke or hear if he has a joke or something, and then and allow that opportunity to happen and not just be like closed and angry. But then at the same time, that being said, once I got in the water,
You've got 2 minutes to the horn.
2 minutes of the horn, like right before my heat starts, the last thing I want to do is like make sure that everyone knows that I was kind to them before, because I'm not trying to be like a mean person.
Right. But once the heat starts, you're not going to be.
But the heat's about to
friendly.
start, and I'm going to want to beat you and you're going to want to beat me. So now's my time, not once the heat starts, but right before it, where it's like, I want to get in that zone of like, I'm only here to win and get out of my way because I want to win.
So tell us your little routine.
And so I like to do this, but I like to like, and it's funny now saying this because like if anyone sees the video, they'll be like, oh, this is what he was talking about. But like I like to jump off my board and get my hair wet. Cause like that one thing, and it's not superstition, but it's uncomfortable to surf when your whole body isn't wet for some reason.
Okay.
Like I always
I never knew that.
When your head gets wet, you feel like you're underwater a little bit. Like, and when it's dry, when you first get up and you're dry, it just feels different.
You feel like a phony.
You feel like you're not ready
really...
and you need to fall first before you get wet. Right. So there's that idea of like, oh, once like for video's sake, when someone's videoing you, the first wave on video, your hair might be dry if you got out with the dry, and then the next wave you fall, and then the next clip your hair is wet. Okay. So it's like, anyways, there's that whole thing, and I like to get wet before the heat starts, and so I dive underwater and I just kind of like look up and I just think about like, okay, it's game time. Now I'm angry. I was happy before, but now I just want to win.
Right.
And I'm going to do anything I can within the rules of surfing to win this heat.
Right. But wait, while you're under, you look up from under the water. And like you said last night, I think we used the word like it's kind of getting grounded, like you're being really present.
Yeah, definitely. Like, okay, like I'm seeing the same thing I see every time before my heat starts, which is like, that means my heat's about to start. You're kind of reminding your body like, now it's time to go. Like maybe the paddle out looks different. Maybe sometimes you're on a jet ski. Sometimes you're jumping off a cliff to get in the water. But now I'm in that position right before the heat starts, where I'm looking up at my board and I'm underwater. And
I think people can take it. Don't take this wrong, anyone, but go ahead and share the analogy that came to you, because it's got great analogies.
I was thinking, well, somebody, it's not from me. And I got to be clear that like everything that I'm doing, that I'm like practicing and these thoughts I'm using, they're not just like coming from me. They're from other people that have thought of them first, and I'm just using them in my own way. So I feel like I need to give credit where credit is due and link to all this and whatnot. But
I'm also going to hop in here to say, anyone that knows Luke is the nicest person. And competition, as much as he says he loves to compete, and he does, and he wants to be the best, he's also incredibly thoughtful and kind.
I'm self-conscious too.
And if anything, he errs on the side of being nice, to the point that we're pretty sure he's lost heats because he let somebody have a wave that anyone else would have been like, heck no, I'm taking it. Yeah. So he needs to work on not caring so much about people, because in a contest, that's what you're doing. You're trying to win.
It's cool,
so
because
when he says what he's about to say, he does not have natural
take it with a grain of
killer
salt.
Instincts.
And you know what I just realized? I know where this one comes from.
Where?
It actually comes from Kobe Bryant.
Oh.
So this is a long time ago. Kobe Bryant was talking about this in an interview about, I don't even know how he was relating it to his life.
Yeah, because
he said
on a team.
Yeah, but he's the GOAT when it comes to mental preparedness, right? And so like that's another person. Everyone should listen to him and his advice if you can. But basically, I like to think of the movie Gladiator, which like if you've seen it,
I can't remember if I've watched it.
It's a crazy movie. It's really dramatic and it's really sad because
Probably
it starts
you
off
don't
with
recommend kids watching it.
No. But it starts off with this guy's whole family getting killed.
Right.
And it was a setup, and he gets framed, or he doesn't get framed, but he gets sent to jail, and all this different stuff happens. He ends up being in these gladiator games, which were a real thing, very real. And he basically is forced with a situation where he has to kill people to stay alive. Everyone in this
in the ring,
arena, coliseum, whatever you want to call it. And in the movie, there's like these moments right before the fight starts. They're all let in there, and then like the gates are open, or the sounding horn or whatever, and then everyone starts fighting, and it's last man standing wins. And he does this thing where he like kind of like picks up the dirt and like, I don't know if he like licks it or if he smells it. I can't remember, but he kind of gets this, like he rubs it in his fingers, you know? Yeah. And it's like this grounding moment, like you were talking about. It's like he's reminding himself what he's about to do.
Yeah.
Now he's in the position, because in that situation you got, and it's not something you necessarily need to dwell on, but it's like thousands of people are screaming, and these guys around you are like, you know, like pooping their pants because it's kill or be killed.
Right.
And he's sitting there and he's just like
being
focusing
present,
in the moment.
and
he's
present.
like, okay, I'm here to do a job.
I love it.
And so
you dive under the water.
In the same way that he wants to kill people, I want to win my
heat.
Heat.
Everybody.
And so I go underwater. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. This is my situation. This is the last thing I see before my heat starts. And then I come up and I'm just like, I'm angry and I'm ready. I'm just looking at the lineup, and you're not allowed to go yet because it's still the other heat. And so what they do is they hold the other heat back. There's 4 people in your heat, and they're kind of sitting in the channel, and we're sitting there, and I'm just like, I just let me in, like let the horn go so I can just get this going. Like I just want to like get in that, and it's fun because it's like, you know, listening to like some like fast paced music or something gets your heart rate going, but in a good way. And you're just like, let's go, let's do this thing. And then the horn goes, and then the heat starts, and then I'm just like, and then it's about controlling that.
And wait, the other thing you told me you did was then after you come up then you get on your board and you sit and you take deep breaths, and you'll even close your eyes.
So the really important thing throughout like all of this that I've been going through is like everyone deals with the nerves of competing and the anxiety, and a lot of that comes about in like your body getting prepared, and it feels uncomfortable because it's not normal. And so your stomach, you feel lightheaded.
When I'm watching, by the way, same things.
Well, you can practice this too then.
I do. I take deep breaths. I'm like over there going
through your nose.
Yes, through my nose.
So basically like the best thing to do is to realize that it's actually a preparation response for your body. And it's people in the military can probably tell you better than I can that it's actually allows your body to function better in the most critical situations. And it's a survival instinct. It's like, I'm here to survive, but it's also like, I'm here like to do really well. And so basically like the deep breaths is how you get because when you have a fast heart rate, you think faster. I think that's just like that's just a rule of thumb. Maybe I'm creating that idea, but it feels like that to me.
Okay.
And so when you breathe slow and deep, it slows your heart rate down.
Yeah.
But you still have that feeling of like nerves, and you can say it's good.
Yeah.
And so basically,
and you were saying, I know one more analogy.
What is that?
Like if your feet, like your legs start maybe being a little shaky.
Oh yeah.
And you thought of like a cowboy, I guess you call it.
Is it
when
a cowboy?
Like their fingers, like
they're about
to grab their gun.
That's a funny analogy. So I was thinking about like the old Western movies where there's a standoff, and they walk, and then they turn around and they shoot each other. But in the movies, there's
a lot of death here, Luke.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, guys. I'm a guy. No, but
their hands.
There's always that clip of their hands. And they're always like shaking, ready to grab the gun. Yeah. Their fingers are wiggling, you know? Yeah. And it's like they're loosening them up, ready to grab the gun. And so like one thing that happens a lot is like your legs start to get bouncy when you're sitting on the beach before you heat, or in the water even. Sometimes you're sitting in the water and there's no resistance, but your feet are just like squiggling underwater, and you're like, what's going on? And so I just think of it as like those fingers, like they're ready to react, and your legs are ready to react.
And you so said you even say like, I'm thankful my feet are ready to go.
Yeah, like if it was after a marathon, your legs might not do that because they're absolutely like spent.
Oh, that's
But in this situation, like my body's telling me it still has enough energy to do something reactive and crazy. And so like my legs are shaking, but that means I'm ready to go. So
there we go.
Yeah, that's kind of that.
Wow.
That was like a really comprehensive mental deep dive.
And we'll keep this forever because you're going to learn so much more, and you're going to.
And the main thing is just to keep thinking about it. Be aware.
Yeah.
And whether or not
learning.
It helps you or not, you just keep learning and keep keeping aware of how you think, and in the
And
long
then,
run,
I mean,
that
there's so
helps.
much more we could talk about maybe in future conversations, but what happens when your first wave, you surfed really well, but you fell on an air, which, I mean, all these heats, Luke, I think he fell once. He says he fell more than once, but I mean, you surfed so incredibly well, Luke. You did so great. But what do you do then in that moment? You look out and you see someone else getting their 9, getting their 8,
Yeah.
and you're like, easily could go into a tailspin.
And I have in the past, but there's a lot of ways to respond in this situation. And I think thinking it's too late, like, oh, I'm already being reactive, or I'm already anxious, I'm already stressed. Like, that's also never helpful when you say like, it's too late now. I think reminding yourself it's never too late in those situations is like, that's a whole nother conversation, like you said, of like being prepared for the bad. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to.
There is, and tapping into that mental stuff is just so powerful. And, again, I know it goes without being said, but that you're prayerful every day, that you talk to the Lord, journal, this is
it's
all
like
a conversation.
The secular world is just like, meditate on it.
Right.
And it's like, dude, meditating is like, you're basically like asking for something to happen, but you're neglecting the fact that there is a creator who literally has wired your body to do exactly what it's supposed to do. So it's like, just anytime that I hear people basically, when I hear a nugget, I'm like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And they say like the word meditate, instead of being like, oh, the meditate, well, that's weird. I'm like, dude, I'll just pray about that.
Yeah.
Like, why not?
You have an advantage.
Does it feel wrong? No. I know that God wants me to be calm in my heat and and prepared to do and I don't want a fear of failure to be in the way. That means my heart's in the wrong place. So it's when all these different situations, just pray about it.
Yeah.
And have a conversation with God about it.
Yeah.
And look in the Word, because that's where all this stuff can be backed up by.
That's right. Wisdom, all of it. So good, Luke. Well, I love talking to you, and I think there's so much more that could be said, and we'll continue to have these conversations. But I love that we've kind of just documented your entire surf career from childhood on. And I think it's really interesting. I love to hear. I think you're a great storyteller, and I will keep encouraging you, and now here in front of everyone, to write down your stories, because you have so many. I mean, you guys, we could do a whole episode on Luke's international travel journeys.
Just want to audio document it.
Yeah.
Like this.
Well,
like this.
That works. And then someone else can write it for you, but it's a book and a half. So thank you, Luke, for sharing your life and some of the inside scoops. We're hoping that your competitors don't listen to this and get any of your...
It's fine. It'll just push them to push me.
There we go. That's the attitude.
Right? You got to spin it in a positive way, always.
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 Well, thanks for being here, Luke.
Thank you.
Love you.
Appreciate it. Love you.
All right, friends, if you listened to all of that, you deserve a gold star, and I really do hope you enjoyed it. Again, show notes are found at monicaswanson.com/Luke-Swanson. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to leave a comment over there, or if you want to throw out a question or have any follow-up topics you are interested in talking about, whether it's for Luke or on this topic of youth sports, please feel free to email me at aloha@monicaswanson.com. All right, friends, we have some amazing topics coming up the rest of this month and summer and into the fall already scheduled. So keep coming back, spread the word about the podcast. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, aloha.
How often do you compare yourself to others? It's easy to envy friends' lives on social media when you only see the good parts. But comparison is the thief of joy. Online therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, because your best life is always better than the idea of someone else's. Stop comparing and start living with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.